Amanda with Radroot, and I'm here today to share a few practices coming from the Ayurvedic perspective on conscious cooking. So when it comes to cooking consciously, really the idea with Ayurveda is that we're staying present, we're staying mindful. And in our modern lives and in anyone's lives, there's typically a lot of distraction or a lot of other things going on that may prevent us from having a more engaged cooking experience. We'll take it step by step here, give you a few tips, a few kind of practices that you might want to bring into your kitchen, into your experience, but then also pulling it back a little bit, and I'll pare back and tell you a little bit about what might be some ideas if it's not the most ideal environment around you at a given time. So, starting from scratch, as you get started in your practice, when you're getting ready to cook, ideally we'll have sort of all of our ingredients present, right? So if we're cooking a recipe, or even if we're just throwing together something basic like a sandwich, we've got everything laid out in front of us. Now, if you are going to be spending a little more time in the kitchen, say cooking dinner or preparing something that brings in a little more time and effort, it's really lovely to have a moment to just take a pause. And this is really in any cooking situation, but to take a pause and to ground and to be present in the moment. Now, this doesn't have to involve anything major. It can be literally very consciously placing your feet on the floor, observing the feeling of the earth beneath your feet, that literal grounding sensation, even as you stand up nice and tall. A couple other ideas might be to even place hands on the counter, on cutting board, any place that you'll be preparing to really ground the body, both hands and feet. You might close the eyes, take a deep breath in and out. And feel yourself within the space. Simple as that. And if there's one takeaway from this entire little video that you take today, that might be the practice you take going forward. So beyond that, bringing in all of our ingredients, or our mise en place, as the beautiful French term of everything in its place when it comes to bringing in our cooking space and our cooking ingredients, is to have things prepared before we start to throw them in the pan. Now, this is one area of cooking where I definitely have some hang-ups. I love to just plow into a recipe, start throwing things in, but then I hit that moment of where I go, oh crap, I didn't chop that and it needs to go in, or else everything's gonna overcook or burn. So stepping back at the beginning of our cooking practice to really stop and say, all right, I've put my ingredients, I've chopped them up, I've taken my garlic, I've minced it, put it maybe in a container or even off to the side of your cutting board to just have it ready to go when you need it. A great practice that you've probably already heard about before, but just a gentle reminder, especially in Ayurveda, that mise en place, or having everything in its place before you start, is super key. Keeps you calm, keeps you grounded through the process, and keeps everything in order, which for some of us in our monkey minds can be a real good, kick. So with that said, moving on to starting the practice as well, whether you take that breath, take that grounding feet on the earth, it's really lovely to light a candle. Now, what's cool about the candle, and this isn't just for aesthetics, although it is lovely and it can be pleasing to the eye, but what's really nice about the candle is it also represents Agni, and Agni is our digestive fire. So what are we doing here? We're cooking. We're lighting a little fire both here on our space, but also within the belly. So it's kind of a little bit of symbolism, but it's also a way of grounding as well. So a nice little practice to bring in when you start your cooking. With that, your tools. Really nice to have some pieces that are made of wood, of steel. Basically, we're steering away from plastics. And you probably know this when you've heard not a great idea to heat your food, for example, in the microwave in a plastic container. Same rule sort of applies here when it comes to cooking. So if we've got maybe steel pans versus non-stick or even cast iron, utensils like wooden spoons or spatulas are great to have on hand as well. So we're not getting those little microplastics or those little sheddings, even the stuff you can't see that might be getting into our food. So even just investing in a couple pieces here and there are really nice, and they'll last forever. Whereas plastic, I have found in the past, it breaks down. Even though it might be tough at first, it'll break down, and it also means that's breaking down into your food. So what else we got? Staying hydrated. I know, you hear it all the time, whether you're out in the world or doing anything, but even while cooking, have a cup of water, maybe a cup of nice warm tea handy with you during your process, so you can have a sip here and there. It can be very easy to get engaged in this process and to lose sight of ourselves and our well-being as we're going along. What's really key about the cooking process, especially in Ayurveda, is where we are mentally and in our heart as we put forth this effort, especially whether we're feeding ourselves or feeding others. The intention that goes into our food is so important. And so if you're coming from a place of heated feelings or literally heated in the body or in the belly and you need to hydrate, take care of yourself. So it doesn't just go into the water, it also goes into our minds. So hydrating both the body, but then also staying present in where our brains and our bodies are feeling in the moment. Nurturing that. That's the idea. All right. Other than that, couple little preparation bits beforehand, making sure we've perhaps soaked any lentils, pulses, grains, rice, that sort of idea. These can be a little tougher on the belly, on the digestion, and it depends on your system, on your constitution. But as a general rule of thumb, especially at Ayurveda, if you know you will be cooking a particular dish that includes maybe a brown rice, basmati rice, lentils, dal, any other, again, tougher, needing to be soaked and brought to life through boiling water type practices, doing a pre-soak, even if for a couple hours, ideally overnight, is going to make those foods even softer and more tender, so that once they do hit the water, do hit with the other ingredients, that they'll be even easier to digest in your body once you actually eat them. And we'll probably have some more videos in the future talking about those exact practices with those foods. So just a little teaser, but just to know as you go into your process that that's a really good practice to bring in to make sure our food is extra digestible. Yeah. Other than that, distractions, focus. It's hard. I'm personally in a space where I don't have a ton of distraction. I don't have small kids. I have one small dog. He doesn't do a whole lot. Whereas in other environments, it can be complete chaos, especially in the kitchen where everybody gathers and runs around and gets snacks and is doing their daily life kind of routine. So if, again, there's one takeaway aside from maybe taking a pause or a breath before you start to cook that I'd love for you to have in this video, it's to give yourself grace. To know that a cooking experience doesn't have to be this magical, mystical sort of idea of what this needs to look like. It doesn't have to be peaceful and quiet and zen-like. If we've got life happening around us, cool. Maybe those people who are nearby can join in the process. Maybe you have influence over them, over how this is sort of a sacred time. Let's treat it as such. And if anything, take a breath, keep going, bringing in the mind and the body and knowing that in your heart, you are giving forth this love literally on a plate to people that you have generated, that you have cultivated yourself. So a lot of intention goes in here. It doesn't necessarily mean the final product has to be perfect. It doesn't even mean the process has to be perfect. What's really coming into play in conscious cooking is that piece of being conscious, of being mindful, of allowing this to actually be a practice and not to be perfection, which is part of our yoga practice, which is part of our life practice. So I think that might be it for today. If you have any questions, I always welcome questions, comments, discussion. come through my website at www.radrootfood.com. There we've got additional tips, discussion, recipes, as well as the ability to look for upcoming in-person gatherings and workshops where we talk about Ayurvedic cooking, as well as practical Ayurveda, seasonal Ayurveda, lots of great stuff. And I look forward to engaging with you in the future. Thanks so much for checking this out. See you next time.